My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 33 years old. And 8 days before I was supposed to get engaged, my boyfriend told me he was leaving. Not in a dramatic way, not with shouting or accusations. Just a conversation on the couch we picked out together. "I've been thinking a lot," Daniel said, sitting across from me, hands clasped like he was about to deliver bad news at a hospital. "And I need to be honest with you. There's something about that sentence. It never brings anything good." I remember setting my phone down slowly, like if I moved too fast, I might miss something important. "Okay," I said. "What's going on?" He exhaled. "I'm leaving." If you've never heard those words from someone you built a future around, they don't land all at once. They echo. They repeat. They stretch out into something unreal. "Leaving?" I asked, my voice strangely steady. "Like breaking up?" He nodded. "I've reconnected with someone from my past, my high school ex-girlfriend. Her name's Melissa." The name meant nothing to me. At least, not yet. "She's going through a divorce right now," he continued, his voice softening in a way I hadn't heard in months. "And she needs me." Needs me. That phrase settled between us like something fragile. "And you think she needs you more than I do?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. I sat there, staring at him, trying to match this version of him with the man who had spent the last 3 years talking about marriage. Looking at rings. Walking through neighborhoods, pointing at houses we couldn't afford yet, and saying things like, "Someday." "When did this happen?" I asked. "A few months ago," he said. "We ran into each other at a mutual friend's wedding." Something in his tone felt practiced. Like he'd told this story before. Started talking again. And then, feelings came back. Just like that. As if feelings were something that simply returned, like misplaced keys. "And you've been talking to her this whole time?" I asked. He nodded, eyes downcast. "It wasn't like that at first." "Of course it wasn't." "It never is," I said quietly. He leaned forward slightly. "I didn't plan for this, Evelyn. She's just going through something really hard. Her husband is leaving her. She's devastated. And somehow, that made this okay?" I tilted my head. "And your solution is to leave me? To help her through her divorce?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "I just realized I still care about her." Still. The word echoed louder than anything else. "I might have always cared about her," he added. There it was. The truth, hidden in plain sight. I looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he started to shift uncomfortably in his seat. He was waiting. Waiting for something. Tears, anger, begging. Something. Instead, I just nodded slowly. "I hope she finds peace," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Your ex," I clarified. "Divorce is hard. I hope she gets through it." The silence that followed was almost surreal. He stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "That's it?" he asked. "You're not going to fight for us?" "Fight." Like this was something worth fighting for. "You just told me you have feelings for someone else," I said calmly. "And you're leaving me for her. What exactly am I supposed to fight?" "I don't know," he muttered. "I just thought you'd be more upset." "I am upset," I said. And that was true. Just not in the way he expected. I'm just not going to beg someone to stay who doesn't want to be here. He packed a bag that night. Not everything. Just enough to leave. He said he'd come back for the rest later. I helped him carry it to the door. That seemed to confuse him more than anything else. Over the next week, he came back twice. Each time, a little more distant. Each time, watching me like he was trying to figure something out. I handed him boxes. Wrapped up dishes. Even gave him the coffee maker because he'd bought it. I was polite. Calm. Detached. And the strange thing is, it wasn't an act. Something inside me had already shut off. Like my mind had looked at the situation and decided, no, we're not doing this. Not again. Not like this. 3 weeks later, I saw it on social media. A photo of him and Melissa. Smiling. Close. Captioned with a heart emoji and something about second chances. Second chances. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I blocked him, closed the app, and went back to my life. I started cooking again. Real meals. Not the takeout we used to order when neither of us felt like trying. I called friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Went out. Laughed. Pretended everything was fine, until, slowly, it started to feel a little more real. Work helped. Routine helped. Time helped. For 2 months, I heard nothing from him. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. And I thought, that's it. That's how it ends. 3 years of my life. Reduced to silence. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Something in my gut told me I should. Hello? There was a pause. Then a woman's voice. Soft. Careful. Hi, I'm sorry to call you like this, she said. I know this is strange, but my name is Rebecca. Another pause. I'm Daniel's ex-girlfriend's husband. My grip tightened on the phone. I found your number through a mutual connection, she continued, and I think you deserve to know something. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. What is it? I asked. A breath. Heavy. Unsteady. I found messages, she said, between my wife and your ex-boyfriend. My heart didn't race. It didn't shatter. It just stopped. For how long? I asked quietly. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said, over a year. And just like that, everything I thought I understood shifted. Can I send them to you? She asked gently. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I considered saying no, walking away, letting the past stay buried. But something deeper than pride, deeper than pain, answered for me. Yes, I said. My phone buzzed seconds later. One message, then another, then dozens. Screenshots, dates, words, proof. I sat down slowly as I opened the first one, and somewhere, deep inside me, that cold, quiet clarity returned. Stronger this time. Sharper. Because I already knew, whatever I was about to read was going to change everything. I just didn't know how much. My phone kept buzzing, screenshot after screenshot. At first, I told myself I would skim, just enough to understand. But after the third message, I knew skimming would be impossible. Because the story Daniel had told me, the wedding, the sudden reconnection, Melissa's heartbreaking divorce, the feelings that came back like some tragic movie, wasn't the truth. It wasn't even close. The first message that made my hands go cold was dated 14 months earlier. Daniel, I can't keep pretending this is nothing. I think about you all the time. Melissa. Me too, but we have to be careful. Evelyn trusts you, doesn't she? Daniel. Completely. I stared at that word. Completely. Because yes, I had. There were messages about lunches I never knew happened. Phone calls while I was asleep. Hotel rooms hidden beneath excuses about work. And then, slowly, the pattern became worse. It wasn't impulse. It wasn't confusion. It was planning. Melissa. We can't just blow everything up. It has to look natural. Daniel. I'll start creating distance. You do the same. Melissa. When the timing is right, we leave. Then we wait a few weeks before posting anything. I sat on the edge of my bed, reading in the dark, feeling like I was watching two strangers casually discuss how to dismantle my life. Rebecca stayed on the phone with me while I read. Neither of us said much at first. There was nothing to say. Every few minutes, I heard her breathe in sharply, like she was trying not to cry. Finally, she said, I thought my marriage was struggling because I wasn't doing enough. Her voice broke. I suggested counseling. I gave him space. I blamed myself. I closed my eyes. Because I knew that feeling too. That quiet, humiliating instinct to wonder if you were too much. Or not enough. The worst part came later. A message from Melissa to Daniel 3 months before he left me. He asked about rings again today. I felt awful. But it's temporary.
Temporary.
That was what I had been.
A temporary obstacle.
A woman standing unknowingly in the middle of their timeline. By the time I finished reading, the sadness had turned into something harder. Not rage exactly. Something cleaner.
A refusal.
Rebecca said, I don't know what to do with all of this. I looked at the screenshots again. The dates. The lies. The evidence. Then I said, neither do I. But I know one thing.
What?
We're not crazy. She went silent. Then she whispered, no, we're not. Over the next few days, Rebecca and I kept talking. Not romantically. Not dramatically. Just two people standing in the wreckage of the same explosion, comparing where the pieces landed. She told me the wedding story was fake. Daniel and Melissa hadn't reconnected a few months ago. They had been in contact long before that. The wedding was just the cover story they agreed to use when people started asking questions. And the divorce? That wasn't what started the affair. It was what they created so the affair could become public. At first, Daniel hadn't planned to leave me. Melissa hadn't planned to leave her husband either. They had planned something colder.
A secret life.
2 relationships in daylight. 1 betrayal in the dark. Then, Melissa got tired of sharing him. And Daniel, apparently, decided the easiest way to become a tragic hero was to make his relationship look like it had naturally fallen apart. So he withdrew. Picked fights. Acted distant. Let me wonder what I had done wrong. Let Rebecca wonder what she had failed to fix. All while sending Melissa messages about how close they were to freedom. 8 days after Rebecca first called me, Daniel texted. First time since he left. I heard you've been talking to people about me. That's really disappointing, Evelyn. I almost laughed.
Disappointing.
As if I had forgotten to return a library book. I didn't answer. An hour later, another text came through. Spreading rumors won't change anything. Melissa and I are happy. You should try moving on. I still didn't answer. Then the third one. Whatever Rebecca told you is one-sided. She's bitter because Melissa chose me. That one did make me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because the arrogance was almost impressive. I forwarded all 3 texts to Rebecca. She replied almost instantly. He really thinks he's the victim. Then, a moment later, they both do. That was when I understood what scared them most. Not revenge. Not drama. Not public humiliation. Truth. The plain, documented, dated truth. Because their entire love story depended on everyone believing the softer version. 2 old flames. Bad timing. Painful but honest decisions. Second chances. But the screenshots told another story. A year of lying. A year of planning. A year of using 2 people as placeholders until the stage was ready. Rebecca asked if I would meet her for coffee. She wanted to build a timeline for her lawyer. I said yes. Because by then, I wasn't doing it for Daniel. I wasn't even doing it for myself. I was doing it because Rebecca had children. Because Daniel had spent months pretending to be a devoted partner and father while using family money to fund hotel rooms. Because Melissa had smiled at me across dinner tables while texting him that I trusted him completely. And because silence was starting to feel too much like cooperation, we met at a small cafe on a rainy afternoon. Rebecca looked exhausted. Elegant, but exhausted. The kind of tired makeup can't hide. She had a folder. I had my laptop. For 2 hours, we built the truth. Dates. Photos.
Trips.
Receipts. Messages. The pattern was horrifying. Every time Daniel told me he had a late meeting, Rebecca had a credit card charge from a hotel. Every time Melissa told Rebecca she was visiting a friend, Daniel had suddenly become busy. Every lie had a matching lie. Every excuse had a mirror. At one point, Rebecca slid a printed screenshot across the table. Daniel. If Evelyn asks, I'll say I'm stressed about work. Melissa. Good. If Rebecca asks, I'll say I'm overwhelmed and need space. I stared at it for a long time. Then Rebecca said quietly, They rehearsed us. And that was exactly it. They hadn't just lied. They had studied us, predicted us, managed us, like problems to solve. By the time we left the cafe, Rebecca had made her decision. She was giving everything to her lawyer. The messages, the receipts, the timeline. All of it. She looked nervous when she said it, like she still feared being cruel. I told her something my father once told me. The truth isn't a weapon. It's just the truth. What people do with it is on them. Rebecca looked down at the folder in her hands. Then she nodded. Then I'm done protecting him from it. 2 days later, Daniel called me.
Unknown number.
I knew it was him before he spoke. His voice was sharp, angry, panicked. I don't know what you think you're doing, he snapped, but you need to back off. I leaned back in my chair at work, strangely calm. Hello to you too. You've been feeding Rebecca information. She asked me questions. I answered honestly. You're trying to ruin my life. No, I said. You built this. I'm just not helping you hide it.
Silence.
Then he said, You don't understand. My relationship with you was already over. I smiled a little, though there was no humor in it. That's not how honesty works, Daniel. You don't get to lie for a year and then rewrite the ending. He hung up. Melissa texted me that night. This has nothing to do with you anymore. I stared at the words, then typed back. It had everything to do with me when you were planning your future with my boyfriend while I was helping him choose engagement rings. She didn't respond. For the first time, I think she understood something. I wasn't begging. I wasn't breaking. And I wasn't going to be quiet just because the truth made her uncomfortable. 3 days later, Rebecca called. Her lawyer had submitted the evidence. Daniel was furious. Melissa was spiraling. Their perfect second chance was already cracking under the weight of what it actually was. And for the first time since he left, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. Because the lie had finally stopped belonging to me. The next time Rebecca called me, her voice sounded different. Not lighter, but steadier. They accepted the evidence, she said. I closed my eyes for a moment, leaning back against my kitchen counter. Everything? Everything, she confirmed. The messages, the receipts, the timeline. His lawyer tried to argue it was obtained illegally. I let out a quiet breath. Let me guess. That didn't go well. Rebecca gave a humorless laugh. The judge disagreed. Apparently, checking a shared household laptop isn't hacking. Of course it wasn't. Truth rarely needs permission to exist. What happened after that unfolded quickly. Almost too quickly. Daniel didn't apologize. He didn't even try to explain. He got angry. At Rebecca. At me. At the situation. At the fact that consequences had finally caught up to him. Rebecca told me he had called her screaming, accusing her of destroying their family, of invading his privacy, of twisting the narrative. As if the narrative hadn't been written by his own hands. A few days later, she called again. They gave me temporary primary custody. I sat up straighter. Rebecca. He only gets supervised visitation, alternate weekends, for now. There was a pause. He's furious, she added quietly. But the judge said his pattern of deception raised concerns about his judgment. I looked out the window, watching people pass by on the street like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because for once, the truth wasn't just known. It was recognized. Daniel tried to call me again after that. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. 3, actually. The first one was anger. The second one was defensive. The third one was something closer to desperation. You don't understand what you've done, he said, his voice tight. This is affecting everything. My kids, my job, everything. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Because for the first time, I understood something clearly. I hadn't done anything. I had simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of what he had done. Melissa didn't stay quiet either. Of course she didn't. She sent me a long message 2 nights later. You've taken this way too far, Evelyn. You're interfering in things that don't concern you. Daniel's divorce has nothing to do with you. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed, it had everything to do with me when you were sleeping with my boyfriend for over a year. There was no response after that. But the silence didn't last. Because lies rarely survive once the truth starts moving. And the truth was moving.
Quietly. Relentlessly.
A week later, I got a message from someone I hadn't expected. Melissa's sister. Her name was Lauren. We had always gotten along. She had been one of the few people in that entire relationship who felt uncomplicated. Hey, she wrote. I don't even know how to start this, but I'm really sorry. I stared at the message, unsure what she even knew. Sorry for what? I replied. There was a pause. Then, for everything. I didn't know. Not the whole time. I sat down slowly, because that sentence carried weight. What do you think happened? I asked. Her response came a few minutes later. Melissa told us you two had been basically over for months, that you were just going through the motions. I let out a quiet breath. Of course she had. That version of the story was easier to live with. For everyone. I didn't get angry. I didn't argue. I just told the truth. I sent Lauren a timeline. Photos from my phone. Dates. Messages. The dinner we had all shared 3 weeks before the breakup, where Melissa had laughed, held my hand under the table, talked about looking at houses in the spring. Lauren read everything. Then went silent. For almost a full day. When she finally responded, it was just one sentence. I'm showing this to my parents. 2 days later, Rebecca called me again. You're not going to believe this, she said. Try me. Melissa had a fight with her mother. A bad one. I leaned back against my couch, already piecing it together. Let me guess, the truth finally caught up. Something like that, Rebecca said. Apparently, she denied everything at first, then admitted she may have exaggerated parts of the story.
Exaggerated.
That was one way to describe rewriting an entire relationship. The fallout didn't stop there. Daniel, who had once seemed so sure of everything, was now unraveling. Rebecca told me he had moved out of the house, was staying with his parents, fighting the divorce aggressively, losing on every front. He keeps leaving me angry voicemails, she said, blaming me for everything. I smiled faintly. Of course he does. Because people like Daniel don't see consequences as consequences. They see them as unfair punishment. Melissa wasn't doing much better. According to mutual friends, and Rebecca still had a few who quietly shared information, their relationship was already under strain. Arguments.
Tension. Blame.
Because it turns out, a relationship built on lies doesn't suddenly become honest just because it's out in the open. One detail stuck with me. Rebecca mentioned that Daniel's mother had called Melissa, told her she was ashamed, not just of the affair, but of what they had done to Rebecca, to the children. I didn't know why that affected me the way it did. Maybe because, for the first time, someone from his side had said it out loud. And Melissa, she was alone. Not completely, but enough. Her boyfriend was consumed by his legal battle. Her family was questioning everything she had told them. Friends were distancing.
Quietly. Politely.
But noticeably. And me? I didn't do anything. That's the part people don't always understand. I didn't expose them publicly. I didn't send mass messages. I didn't post screenshots online. I did one thing. One simple thing. When people asked me what happened, I told the truth. That was it. That was the entire revenge. And somehow, It was enough. About 3 weeks after everything started unraveling, Rebecca texted me. "I think this is going to work out in my favor," she said. "My lawyer is confident." I smiled at my phone. "You deserve that," I replied. There was a pause. Then, "I couldn't have done this without you." I thought about that for a moment. Then type, "We were both just trying to understand what happened to us." She responded, "At least we weren't alone." Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. A different apartment. Smaller.
Quieter.
Mine. I looked around at the furniture I had chosen myself. The coffee maker that had never been shared. The silence that no longer felt empty. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Some days, maybe. But most days, what I felt was something else.
Relief.
Because I had almost married him. Almost built a life on something that was already broken. Almost trusted someone who had been lying to me for a year. Instead, I got out. Before it went further. Before the lies got deeper. Before the damage became permanent. The last message I ever received from Melissa came weeks ago. Short. Carefully worded. "I hope you find happiness." I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. Without replying. Because happiness wasn't something she got to wish for me. It was something I would build. Without her. Without Daniel. Without any of it. Rebecca texted me one last time that morning. "They're not exactly living happily ever after, are they?" I smiled. "For real this time." "Doesn't look like it." "Good," she replied. I laughed out loud. The first genuine laugh in weeks. And in that moment, I realized something simple. Daniel had said Melissa needed him more than I did. But what she really needed was someone willing to lie beside her. And what he needed was someone who would never hold him accountable. They found each other. And I found my way out.